Welcome, dear listener, to a journey not through grand events or sweeping narratives, but into the quiet, everyday rhythm of lives long past. Allow your breath to deepen, your shoulders to soften, and the hum of your own present moment to gently recede. Let the familiar sounds of your day dissolve like mist on a distant field as we drift into a time when the world moved with a slower, more deliberate cadence. Find comfort in this stillness, this gentle invitation to simply be. As you settle into this quiet space, perhaps you might share in the comments below where in the world you are listening from and what time of day it is for you. And if these calm, historical meanderings offer a moment of quiet solace, a subtle invitation rests with you to subscribe, to join us again as we explore the echoes of lives long past. Now, feel the air around you begin to shift, subtly, imperceptibly. The light outside your window might seem to dim or perhaps to soften, as if filtering through layers of time itself. The sounds you know so well begin to thin, becoming indistinct, like whispers carried on a faraway breeze. You are not moving, but the centuries are, gently, patiently unfolding around you. A faint scent, earthy and deep, might begin to waft through the air, carrying echoes of wood smoke and damp soil. Let your mind quiet, allowing yourself to be guided by sensation alone. The familiar textures of your immediate surroundings soften, their sharp edges blurring. You are stepping, not with your feet, but with your very presence, into a distant, quieter existence. Time itself seems to become viscous, slowing to a thick, honeyed flow, allowing every detail to linger, to be fully felt. The breath deepens, slowing to match an ancient rhythm, as the world of long ago gradually reveals its intricate, lived reality. The world that slowly, patiently reveals itself is made of the earth and shaped by the hands that work it. Dwellings are low and solid, their forms rising from the land as if grown from it. Most are built from thick, unplaned timbers, dark with the passage of many seasons, their surfaces rough to the touch. The spaces between these heavy beams are filled with wattle and daub, a patient weaving of supple branches coated thickly with clay and straw, creating walls that absorb the dampness of the air and release the subtle scent of earth. In places where the land offers stone, the walls are built of it, heavy and cold, absorbing the deep chill of winter and the pervasive damp that never quite leaves. Over these walls, heavy thatch roofs are layered deep with dried reeds or straw, a thick, living blanket that sighs softly with every gust of wind, catching the rain in a gentle, rhythmic patter and muffling the loudest sounds from the sky. From a small opening in these roofs, or from a crude hole in the wall, a constant, thin plume of wood smoke curls upwards, a living breath against the vast sky, its pervasive, comforting scent clinging to every thread of clothing, to every strand of hair, to the very air of human habitation. This scent is rarely absent. It is the smell of home, of warmth, of continuous life. The ground underfoot is a direct, unfiltered connection to the land. Inside the dwellings, it is most often packed earth, hardened by the tireless tread of countless feet, sometimes covered with scattered rushes or coarsely woven mats made of straw or reeds. These offer a slight give beneath the foot and absorb some of the dampness that rises from the soil below. Outside, paths are simply trodden earth, turning to thick, clinging mud after rain, its rich, wet scent rising with every step. In the dry seasons, this mud hardens into cracked, uneven surfaces, the dust lifting with every breath of wind, settling on every surface, the leaves of plants, the rough fabric of clothes, the very skin itself. The sensation underfoot is rarely smooth or even. There is the subtle give of damp soil, the sharp pressure of a hidden stone, the squelch of mud between bare toes, the dry grittiness of dust clinging to the soles. It is a constant, intimate dialogue with the ground, its textures shifting with the rhythms of weather and season. The air is filled with organic sounds, woven into the fabric of daily existence. The distant lowing of cattle, a deep, resonant call carried across the fields, or the insistent bleating of sheep from a nearby pen. The sharp, triumphant crow of a rooster announces the unseen hours, marking the passage of dawn and midday with unvarying regularity. The rhythmic clink of a bucket chain at the well, followed by the clear splash of water as it strikes the surface far below, signals a constant, vital task. The soft rustle of wind through tall grass or the heavy leaves of ancient trees provides a pervasive, whispering presence, a constant murmur. Within the dwelling, the omnipresent crackle and hiss of the hearth fire offers a steady, comforting rhythm, a living presence in the heart of the home. The soft thud of kneading dough against a wooden board, the rhythmic scrape of a wooden spoon against an earthenware pot, the quiet murmur of voices when permitted. These are the intimate sounds of human domesticity. There are no sudden, jarring mechanical noises, no abrupt roars or blares. The soundscape is fluid, alive with the subtle workings of nature and human effort, each sound distinct, yet blending into a continuous, natural hum. Even moments of quiet are not truly silent. They are filled with the subtle shifting of the dwelling as it settles, the faint scuttling of unseen creatures in the thatch, the deep, ancient resonance of the earth itself, a vast, quiet breathing. Textures are immediate, rough and honest, speaking of their raw origins and purposeful use. The unplaned surface of timber, its subtle splinters, a constant reminder of its natural state, feels solid and unyielding beneath the palm. The cool, granular feel of rough-cut stone absorbing the sun's warmth or the night's chill feels ancient beneath the hand, bearing the marks of wind and rain. The dry, brittle touch of straw, crumbling slightly when crushed, offers a fleeting, earthy sensation, its scent faint and sweet. Wool, often coarse and undyed, scratches persistently against the skin, yet provides indispensable warmth, its faint lanolin scent a reminder of its animal origin, an intimate presence. Linen spun by hand feels softer, but still retains a subtle irregularity from its hand processing, far from the smooth refinement of later fabrics, its coolness a subtle relief in warmth. Clay pots, often unglazed and porous, hold water and food, their surfaces cool and slightly gritty to the touch, often smelling faintly of damp earth or their stored contents, a constant reminder of their origin. Metal, when present, is usually iron, heavy and strong, often blackened by fire and use, its surface sometimes pitted from the blacksmith's hammer, giving it a tactile history, cool and hard to the touch. Every object speaks of its maker, its material, its purpose, its long use, conveying a sense of enduring connection between human hands and the natural world. Your fingers learn to read the language of these textures, their weight, their coolness, their subtle imperfections, each touch a quiet conversation with the tangible world. Natural light dictates the rhythms of existence with an absolute, unyielding authority. There is no artificial illumination to extend the hours of work or leisure beyond the sun's decree. Dawn brings a slow, creeping illumination, a gentle gray that gradually strengthens, revealing the world in a soft, muted palette, colors emerging slowly from the lingering shadows. Midday sees the sun at its most intense, casting sharp, defined shadows outside, though often muted within dwellings by thick walls and small, unglazed openings, creating pools of bright light and deep, cool shadows within the interior. As evening approaches, the light softens, turning golden, then deepens into a profound twilight until only the faint glow of the moon and stars, or the flickering warmth of a hearth fire or a single candle remains to pierce the absolute darkness. Life adapts instinctively to this ebb and flow, rising with the sun, settling with its descent. Work is done by the light of day. Evenings are for quieter tasks by the fire's glow, for shared warmth, for storytelling in the shifting shadows, where faces are illuminated by dancing flames, the outside world recedes into deep darkness and silence. It sounds muffled. The absence of constant, bright light encourages a different way of seeing, an appreciation for the subtleties of illumination, for the way a single flame can transform a vast, dark space, making the familiar unfamiliar and drawing people closer. Around the shared warmth and fragile light, the tools of this era are extensions of the hand and body, crafted for specific tasks, often heavy and unrefined, their surfaces smoothed by repeated contact with human skin and the persistent friction of work. A simple wooden plow, its share perhaps tipped with iron, is dragged slowly by oxen across the fields, turning the earth with a steady, grinding sound, the rich scent of freshly turned soil rising behind it. Hand axes split logs with sharp, percussive blows, the crisp scent of fresh wood filling the air, mingling with the aroma of human effort and sweat. Simple looms weave thread into cloth with a rhythmic clack of the shuttle and the soft thud of the beater, the warp and weft creating a tangible manifestation of human patience and skill, a rhythmic sound of creation. Each tool carries the weight of its purpose, the history of its use etched into its worn handle, its sharpened edge, its very form speaking of generations of ingenuity applied to necessity. Daily rhythms are inextricably tethered to the cycles of the earth and the demands of subsistence. Planting, harvesting, tending animals, preparing food, mending clothes. These are not hobbies or occasional chores, but the very fabric of existence, demanding constant effort and attention, dictating the flow of the days and seasons, shaping the contours of every life. There is a deeply ingrained understanding of the interdependence between human effort and nature's bounty, a profound respect for the source of all sustenance. These rhythms are not imposed by a clock, but by the needs of the body and the land, by the rising and setting of the sun, by the hunger that grows within the belly and the ache in the limbs. There is a deep, unspoken knowledge in the hands, in the back, in the persistent ache of muscles, that every action, however small, contributes to the ongoing dance of survival. Spaces are defined by function and necessity, deeply intertwined with the routines of life. The single-room dwelling, serving as kitchen, bedroom, and gathering place, its center always the hearth, radiating warmth and light, its air thick with the memory of countless meals and quiet conversations, a constant anchor in the fluctuating cold of the outside world. The byre, sheltering animals close to human warmth, their soft breathing and subtle body heat a constant presence, their specific animal scent a familiar part of the household air, a reminder of the shared life between humans and their beasts. The communal well, a focal point for gathering and exchange, its cool water drawn up bucket by bucket, a vital resource, its stone lip worn smooth by countless hands, echoing with the soft splashes of drawn water. The fields, stretching outwards, the ultimate source of life, their contours shaped by generations of labor, their colors shifting with the seasons, green in spring, golden in summer, brown and fallow in winter, a constant visual reminder of the deep, the unending connection to the land. Existence here is raw, immediate, and utterly bound to the natural world. It is a life lived in constant dialogue with the elements, with the rhythms of growth and decay, with the simple, unchanging truths of earth and sky. Every action, every material, every sound speaks of a world deeply intertwined with its environment, where survival is a daily, tangible effort, and time is measured by the sun's passage and the turning of the seasons. Within this world, where life was tethered to the earth and the ceaseless turning of its seasons, time etched its indelible marks, not just on the timbers of the dwelling or the worn tools, but upon the very fabric of the body itself. It was a slow, persistent carving, shaping not with sudden blows, but with the relentless repetition of days, of years, of a lifetime lived in constant effort. The earliest signs were often subtle, almost imperceptible shifts felt deeply within the quiet landscape of the self. A momentary catch, a hesitation that wasn't there before. This was the beginning of a slow shift, the profound awareness of a new kind of presence within the body, a gentle but insistent resistance. One might rise from the low stool by the hearth, or attempt to straighten after hours of bending over the kneading trough and feel the weight of knees when standing. It was not a sharp pain, not yet, but a dull, pervasive pressure, as if the very joints had absorbed the weight of all the years, all the burdens they had borne. The movement upwards, once fluid and effortless, now required a conscious push, a moment of bracing. A subtle tremor might run through the legs, a fleeting instability as the body reoriented itself against the pull of gravity. The cold of the packed earth, rising through worn soles, seemed to seep into these protesting joints, amplifying their newfound heaviness. The sound of a soft, involuntary groan, suppressed before it could fully escape, might accompany this rising. The rough fabric of the homespun breeches or skirt, rubbing against the skin of the knees, felt more pronounced, a constant tactile reminder of this internal friction. And then, the hands, those instruments of ceaseless labor, might begin their own quiet protest, a subtle, almost imperceptible trembling hands. Not constant, not yet, perhaps only when attempting a delicate task, like threading a needle in the dim light of evening, or pouring water from a heavy jug into a smaller bowl. A fine tremor would begin, a barely visible oscillation that caused the water to slop, or the needle to miss its eye. It was a betrayal of precision, a subtle defiance from the very tools of one's livelihood. The touch of cool metal, or the rough texture of a wooden handle, might amplify this tremor, making the sensation more pronounced. The scent of damp earth, clinging to the skin even after washing, would seem to intensify this internal vibration. This trembling was a quiet, private signal, a recognition that the steady certainty of youth was subtly, irrevocably fading. The sound of a dropped spindle, a soft clatter on the packed earth, would be a small public testament to this unwelcome change. As the days blended into weeks and the years accumulated, a new sensation settled into the limbs, a pervasive and stubborn companion. The stiffness that begins in the morning and never quite leaves. Upon awakening on the rough straw mattress, the body would feel rigid, unyielding, as if frozen by the cold of the night. Every joint would protest, every muscle would resist the first movements of the day. To push oneself up from the sleep-hardened straw, to bend, to pull on worn shoes, to simply stretch the arms, each action was a deliberate, painful effort. The cool, damp air of the dwelling, seeping through cracks in the wattle and daub, seemed to amplify this rigidity. The sound of a quiet sigh, a soft groan, might accompany these first stiff movements. And while the sun rose higher and the tasks of the day began, this stiffness would persist. It would loosen slightly with movement, a subtle easing of the tight bands around the joints, a faint warming of the protesting muscles. But it would never entirely recede. Even during the vigorous activity of kneading dough or stirring a heavy pot over the fire, a ghost of that morning rigidity would linger, a dull ache beneath the surface. To sit for too long, to stand for too long, would bring its return, a renewed tightening in the knees, a deeper stiffness in the back. The rough texture of the tools, the solid, unforgiving nature of the ground seemed to emphasize this persistent internal friction. the pervasive scent of wood smoke, a constant presence, felt heavier in the air, somehow mirroring the growing heaviness in the limbs. This stiffness was a new reality, a constant companion that marked the body with the undeniable passage of time, a quiet, internal dialogue with every movement. The marks of time extended beyond the internal aches and tremors, imprinting themselves upon the very outer shell of existence. The rough fabrics that clothed the body, once functional and unremarkable, now bore their own signs of enduring wear, reflecting the changing contours of the aging form. The worn clothing that no longer fits right became a constant, subtle irritation. A tunic, once comfortably loose, might now pull awkwardly across a stooped back, its seams straining. A pair of breeches, once snug, might hang more loosely on thinning limbs, or conversely, pinch uncomfortably where the flesh had thickened with age. The coarse linen shift, worn close to the skin, would have softened with countless washes, but its fabric would be thin in places, almost transparent, unable to offer the same warmth or protection as it once did. The very shape of the garment, once mirroring the body it clothed, now seemed to defy it, a testament to subtle shifts in posture and form. The rough texture of the fabric, thin and worn, felt different against the skin, less protective, more prone to chafing. The faint, persistent scent of old, laundered fabric, mixed with the pervasive wood smoke, seemed to cling more stubbornly to these aging garments. And beneath these ill-fitting clothes, the body continued its quiet protest. The bones that ache with the seasons were a relentless, unyielding companion. With the approach of autumn, a dull, pervasive throb would begin in the joints, a deep, bone-deep cold that penetrated the thickest wool. As winter deepened, the ache would intensify, becoming a constant, gnawing presence in the knees, the hips, the spine. The very marrow of the bones seemed to cry out against the persistent chill that seeped into the dwelling through every crack and crevice. The cold of the packed earth floor, the dampness that rose from the ground, all seemed to intensify this internal pain. The slightest change in atmospheric pressure, a subtle shift in the wind before a storm, would send a new wave of aching through the skeleton. There was no understanding of such pain, no remedy beyond quiet endurance. The sound of a deep, suppressed sigh, or the subtle shift of the body seeking a fleeting moment of comfort, would accompany these seasonal pains. The scent of cold, damp earth, rising with the winter air, felt heavy, mirroring the weight of the ache in the bones. Spring, with its promise of new life, might bring a slight easing, a momentary reprieve, but the ache never fully vanished. It simply receded to a dull throb, a quiet background hum to the returning warmth. Summer's heat, though welcome, could bring its own discomforts, swelling in the joints, a heavy, sluggish feeling. The feeling of cool, damp mud clinging to the aching feet after a walk to the well could offer a momentary, transient relief. These aches were not singular events, but chronic companions, weaving themselves into the fabric of daily life, shaping every movement, every moment of rest. The body became a living barometer of the seasons, its internal landscape mirroring the external shifts of the world, each ache a quiet testament to the relentless passage of time and the accumulated toll of a lifetime's labor. As the body shifted and ached, the portals to the outer world, the senses themselves, also began their slow, almost imperceptible retreat. It was a gradual dimming, a quiet withdrawal that reshaped the very experience of reality. The world began to soften around the edges as a failing sight took hold. The fine threads on the loom, once distinct and sharp, might blur, their individual strands becoming a single, indistinct mass. Faces across the hearth fire, once clear in their expressions, might now appear as softened forms, their features indistinct, their subtle shifts of emotion harder to discern. The intricate patterns of bark on a tree, the tiny imperfections in a piece of carved wood, the delicate veins on a leaf. These details began to recede, dissolving into a general haze. Reading the rare, large-lettered texts, once a comfort, became a strain, the words blurring, dancing on the page. The faint, flickering light of a single candle, once sufficient for a close task, now offered little clarity, making the shadows deeper, more pervasive. The feeling of constant strain behind the eyes, the subtle ache in the brow, became familiar. The world, seen through increasingly clouded lenses, became a softer, more impressionistic place, its sharp edges gently smoothed by the passage of time. The scent of wood smoke, so constant, could be clearly perceived even as the visual landscape blurred. And alongside the dimming sight came a faded hearing. The distant crow of a rooster, once a sharp, distinct announcement of dawn, might now be a muted call, a faraway echo. The soft murmur of conversation from across the dwelling, once clearly audible, might now be a jumble of indistinct sounds, their meaning lost. The subtle rustle of wind through the thatch, the gentle sigh of the fire, the quiet scuttling of unseen creatures, these softer sounds might simply vanish, leaving behind a deeper, more profound silence. To understand a shouted instruction, or to distinguish one voice from another in a crowded space, became an effort requiring intense concentration. The head might cock slightly, tilting towards a source of sound, a subtle, unconscious gesture of straining to hear. The air, heavy with unspoken communication, sometimes seemed to vibrate with muffled sounds just beyond the reach of comprehension. The world of human voices became more distant, more elusive, a constant game of interpretation and partial understanding. The rough touch of hands against the ears, an unconscious effort to bring sound closer, was a frequent gesture. Yet, as sight and hearing retreated, other senses could intensify, becoming more vivid, more immediate. The world of smells more vivid than memories. The sharp, earthy scent of freshly turned soil after a rain, the pungent aroma of brewing herbs in a pot, the sweet, cloying odor of stale food, the deep, comforting smell of seasoned wood. These aromas, once part of the background, now rose with startling clarity, filling the nostrils, awakening forgotten connections. A particular scent might trigger a vivid, almost painful memory, bypassing the fading visual and auditory recollections. The aroma of burning peat or the sharp tang of a specific resin from a distant tree could transport the mind more powerfully than any spoken word or fading image. The scent of a long-ago meal, a particular flower, a specific person, could return with a startling immediacy, bypassing the fading narrative of the past. The very air seemed to carry a richer tapestry of smells, each one a thread connecting the present moment to a deeper, more primal understanding of the world. The constant, comforting scent of wood smoke, always present, became a grounding anchor in this shifting sensory landscape. In this world, where life was measured by the cycle of seasons and the rhythm of labor, the concept of a specific stage of life, defined by age and perceived frailty, simply did not exist in the way that it would come to be understood. There was no term like elderly, no abstract category to neatly classify those whose bodies had begun their inevitable decline. Instead, recognition was immediate, direct, and often brutally descriptive, reflecting the visible changes wrought by time and tireless work. One might simply be called the Old One. Not with malice, not with disrespect, but as a plain statement of fact, an observation of what time had done to the body. It was a recognition of a life lived long, of burdens borne, of countless sunrises and sunsets witnessed. The words would hang in the air, a simple descriptor devoid of the nuanced implications of later eras. The way the light caught the deep lines around the eyes, the subtle tremor in the hand, the slower gait, these were the visible markers of the old one. The rough feel of a gnarled hand, its skin thin and papery, was a constant tactile reminder. The air, thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, carried this unspoken understanding. Or perhaps, more often, the slow one. This was a recognition of the body's undeniable lag, its inability to keep pace with the vigorous rhythms of youth. The pause before rising from a squat, the deliberate, measured steps across the uneven ground, the careful, almost ponderous movement of a hand reaching for a distant object. These were the visible signs of the slow one. It was not a judgment of will, but an acknowledgement of physical reality. The whisper of this descriptor, passed between younger, quicker hands, was often accompanied by an unspoken understanding, a quiet patience born of the inevitability of one's own future. The soft shuffle of slow-moving feet on the packed earth, the gentle sigh that accompanied a deep, effortful breath, these were the sounds that marked the slow one. The scent of worn fabric clinging to a body that moved with greater difficulty seemed to underscore this slowness. These were not labels used in formal address, but internal observations, reflections of a communal understanding rooted in direct, lived experience. The concept of age was not an abstract number, but a tangible presence, felt in the stiffness of the knees, seen in the dimming of the eyes, heard in the slower pace of breathing. It was an identity shaped by the body's declining capacity, a simple recognition of a life having passed through many seasons of toil. The cold stone of the hearth, felt against an aching back, was a constant, solid reminder of the unyielding passage of time and its inevitable impact on the flesh. Even as the body changed, betraying its youth and vigor with every subtle shift, the relentless demands of existence did not diminish. The presence of age did not grant exemption. It simply shifted the nature of the labor. You still work. The hands, though perhaps trembling, the back, though aching, the eyes, though dimming, were still expected to contribute, to perform the essential tasks that sustained life within the humble dwelling. The arduous journeys to the well continued, though perhaps at a slower pace, with more frequent pauses. The heavy wooden yoke, pressing into the shoulders, still demanded a strength that gnawed at tired muscles. The rhythmic clang of the bucket against the stone wellhead, the groan of the pulley, the clear splash of water far below, these sounds remained constant. And then, the heavy, sloshing carry water back to the dwelling, the chilled buckets pressing against aching legs, the constant strain on the lower back. Each journey was now a deliberate act of will, a testament to enduring necessity. The scent of cold, damp well water, mingled with the earthy aroma of wet fabric, filled the air with every slow step. By the hearth, the rhythmic dance of food preparation continued. Hands, perhaps arthritic, but still nimble with ingrained habit, would patiently stir pots. The heavy earthenware, warm from the fire, would be held with a firmer grip, the wooden spoon moving in slow, steady circles through simmering gruel or boiling vegetables. The gentle bubbling sound, the faint hiss of steam rising from the pot, the earthy, comforting scent of cooking food, these were the familiar accompaniments to this continuous task. The warmth radiating from the fire, welcome on aching joints, still required proximity to the smoke and heat, a constant reminder of the body's perseverance. The touch of the smooth, worn wooden spoon, a familiar comfort in the trembling hand, was a quiet connection to decades of tireless effort. And the meticulous work of household maintenance, the unending cycle of mending and making, persisted. Hands, though less precise, would still patiently patch fabric. The rough linen or coarse wool, worn thin by years of use, would be held up to the flickering candlelight, its imperfections revealed. A worn needle, perhaps slightly bent, would be threaded with careful, deliberate movements, the fine linen thread sometimes escaping the unsteady grasp. The subtle prick of the needle against the skin of a finger, the faint squeak of the thread pulling through the coarse fabric. These were the intimate sounds and sensations of this diligent work. The faint scent of old, laundered cloth, mingling with the pervasive wood smoke, underscored the humble necessity of the task. The soft glow of the candle, a fragile beacon in the encroaching darkness, illuminated the slow, painstaking movements of the hands. In these tasks, and countless others, a profound truth became undeniable. The body lags behind time. The mind might remember the speed, the agility, the effortless strength of youth, but the flesh no longer obeyed with the same swift obedience. A task that once took moments now stretched into longer minutes, each movement imbued with a slow, deliberate effort. The gap between intention and execution widened, a subtle, daily frustration. To bend low, to rise quickly, to reach high, these actions were no longer automatic, but required conscious thought, a moment of preparation, a silent negotiation with protesting limbs. The sound of a deeper, more labored breath, the subtle shift of weight, the quiet tremor in the muscles. These were the constant reminders that the body was no longer the swift, agile instrument of earlier years. The cold of the damp earth, rising through tired feet, seemed to pull at the very energy that still drove the body to its ceaseless tasks. The pervasive scent of effort, of damp cloth and weary skin, mingled with the familiar aromas of the dwelling, creating a rich tapestry of lived experience, a quiet testament to enduring necessity in a body that could no longer keep pace with the relentless march of time. The body, marked by time's slow carving, still worked, its movements deliberate, its strength diminished but enduring. The knees ached, the hands trembled, and the pervasive stiffness never quite left, a constant, low hum beneath the surface of daily tasks. The worn clothing chafed, the bones throbbed with the shifting seasons, and the senses retreated, leaving a quieter, more inward experience of the world. Yet, as the physical self gradually diminished, so too did the external acknowledgments of one's presence and worth. A subtle shift began to settle in the air around the older one, a change in the way conversations flowed in the direction of glances. It was not an unkindness, not a deliberate exclusion, but a quiet, almost imperceptible drawing away of attention. Where once a voice held weight, where opinions were sought and considered, now there was a pervasive quietude. You're no longer asked for your opinion. Only your silence is expected. When a decision was being weighed, perhaps concerning the planting of a field or the mending of a gate, the younger, stronger voices would speak, discussing options, weighing consequences. Your eyes might follow the arc of their hands as they gestured, your ears straining to catch the nuances of their words. A thought might form, a piece of wisdom gleaned from countless seasons of observation, a subtle insight into the quirks of the land or the patterns of the weather. The scent of the earth, heavy with the promise of harvest, might stir a memory of a past drought, a forgotten frost. But the words would remain unformed, unspoken. The silence would extend, unbroken by an invitation to contribute. The air around you, once filled with the eager pull of questions, now felt still, as if holding its breath, expecting no contribution. A quiet observation might pass through your mind regarding the tempering of iron or the best way to smoke a fish for winter, drawn from decades of painstaking effort. The scent of hot metal from the distant smithy, or the faint, briny smell of fish from the drying racks, might evoke these memories with startling clarity. The fingers might twitch, remembering the precise feel of the hammer, the exact tension of the twine. But the opportunity to share this knowledge would not arise. The younger ones, full of their own strength and certainty, would turn away, their backs to you, their conversations flowing past as if the space you occupied held no voice. When discussions arose around the hearth, perhaps about the best way to stretch the last of the winter stores or the appropriate time to visit a distant kin, the voices would rise and fall. Your gaze might settle on the flickering flames, watching the dance of light and shadow, the steady consuming of the wood. A memory of a harsh winter, a time of famine might surface, bringing with it the faint taste of hunger, the chilling feel of cold in the belly. Yet the conversation would flow on, its currents bypassing your quiet corner. The very act of forming a thought, of gathering the words, felt heavy, unwieldy, a struggle that often seemed pointless when no ear was inclined to listen. The dry crackle of the fire, the subtle hiss of sap within a burning log, seemed to mock the unexpressed knowledge. The younger ones would plan and fret, their hands gesturing with youthful vigor, their brows furrowed with concerns that, to your long-accustomed gaze, seemed transient, easily navigated with the wisdom of experience. The rough texture of the loom you once commanded, the smooth wear of the grinding stone, still remembered the precise movements of your hands. The smell of freshly baked bread, warm and comforting, might bring a quiet, unbidden thought about the subtleties of yeast or the proper heat of the oven. But the moment to interject, to offer a piece of that long-held knowledge, would never quite arrive. The conversation would shift, the topic would change, and the opportunity would pass, leaving behind a subtle, lingering taste of unspoken wisdom. This was not an active disregard, but a gradual, unconscious fading. Like a shadow lengthening at dusk, your voice, once a vibrant presence, became less distinct, less necessary. The absence of questions, the lack of a searching gaze directed your way, slowly began to teach a new habit, the habit of quiet observation, of allowing the world to unfold around you without the need for interjection. The air, once vibrating with the expectation of your input, now felt simply still, heavy with its own unspoken rhythms. The distant sounds of children's play, their sharp, clear voices, seemed to highlight the quietude that now enveloped your space. The shift was often felt most keenly when the small gathering around the hearth grew animated, when plans were being made or stories were being shared. The younger generation, full of their own energy and concerns, would unconsciously, subtly eclipse your presence. Younger family members speak over you, past you, around you. A discussion might begin about the next day's tasks, the splitting of firewood, the mending of a broken tool. Your hand might lift almost instinctively to offer a suggestion, perhaps about the grain of the wood or the proper way to set a new handle. But before the first word could form on your lips, a younger voice, strong and clear, would cut across the unspoken thought, launching into a new idea, a different approach. The words, half formed in your throat, would dissolve into a faint, dry taste, unsaid. The air, momentarily thick with your unexpressed intention, would quickly fill with the new voice, its timbre vibrant and unburdened by age. The subtle shift of bodies turning their attention to the new speaker left your own quiet space feeling suddenly peripheral, unengaged. During the evening meal, gathered around the low table, the conversation would weave and flow. Stories of the day's successes, of small frustrations, of rumors from a neighboring village. Your eyes might follow the movements of the spoons in the wooden bowls, the subtle shifts in expression on the younger faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. A memory might rise, a parallel experience from a distant year, a tale that mirrored their present concern. The scent of the simmering gruel, warm and earthy, might bring a sudden clarity to the old recollection. Your lips might part, a slight intake of breath, preparing to speak. But before the sound could emerge, another voice, sharp and eager, would interject, adding a new detail, a different perspective, taking the narrative in an unexpected direction. The moment would pass, the conversation would flow around your silent presence, leaving you with the quiet taste of unspoken words. The crackle of the fire, the soft scrape of wooden spoons seemed to amplify the silence of your unshared stories. Even in moments of shared quiet, a subtle detachment would be felt. A younger hand might reach across you for a piece of bread, their sleeve brushing your arm, but their gaze would be fixed on the object, not on you. Their body language, their casual turning, their quick movements seemed to carve out a space that did not entirely include your slower presence. Their words, when they spoke, were often directed generally into the air or to one another, their attention focused on the immediate, the pressing, the future. You might observe their swift, confident movements, the ease with which they lifted heavy objects, the clarity of their youthful sight, and feel the growing distance between their vibrant present and your fading one. It was not a deliberate slight, but the simple, undeniable reality of the generational shift. The future belonged to them, to their strength, to their fresh perspectives. The wisdom of the past, though vast, was seen less as a living, breathing guide and more as a quiet, unchanging backdrop. The sounds of their laughter, their earnest discussions, their plans for tomorrow filled the dwelling, leaving little room for the echoes of long-ago days. The air, thick with their youthful energy, pressed against your own diminishing vitality, making your silence not just a habit, but an almost involuntary response. The rough feel of your own gnarled hands resting idly in your lap became a quiet symbol of this diminishing participation, a silent observer in the unfolding lives of others. The pervasive scent of human activity, of sweat and effort, seemed to emanate most strongly from the vibrant, busy younger bodies, leaving a subtle feeling of being less central. The constant, unyielding rhythm of the world outside the dwelling, of the village itself, continued its ceaseless motion. Its demands were unwavering, its pace relentless, and it did not bend or pause for the slowing steps of its aging inhabitants. The village still moves, but it does not wait. The sun continued its unvarying journey across the sky, indifferent to the stiffness in knees or the dimming of eyes. Dawn broke with the same sharp clarity, demanding immediate awakening, immediate action. The first sounds of the day, the crow of the rooster, the distant lowing of cattle, the clatter of buckets at the well, began precisely as they always had, pulling the body from its fitful sleep. There was no gentle easing into the day, no allowance for the lingering stiffness that permeated every joint. The cold air that seeped through the cracks in the walls, the damp earth underfoot, were as unyielding as ever, demanding a swift response. The scent of fresh, cold morning air, mingled with the pervasive wood smoke, still carried the sharp tang of immediate responsibility. The tasks of the season, whether planting in the spring mud, weeding in the summer sun, harvesting in the autumn chill, or seeking fuel in the winter snow, continued with an unyielding rhythm. The collective effort of the community, the movement of bodies in the fields, the shared labor of building or repairing, flowed with a speed that left little room for lingering. You might watch from the doorway or from a quiet corner of the field, the steady, rhythmic swing of younger backs, the quick, agile movements of their hands, the sound of their tools striking the earth, the rustle of their movements through the crops, the quick exchange of their instructions, all spoke of a pace that your own body could no longer maintain. The air, thick with the scent of their vigorous effort, felt subtly alien to your slower breath. When groups of people moved from one part of the village to another, perhaps to the common pasture, or to the stream for washing clothes, or to a gathering at the communal oven, their steps were brisk, their purpose clear. You might fall in behind them, your own steps more measured, more deliberate, watching the space between you and them gradually widen. There was no slowing of their pace, no turning back to offer a supporting hand unless specifically needed for a heavy burden. They moved with the confident stride of those whose bodies obeyed them without question, whose time was measured in productive output. The crunch of their boots on the gravel, the swish of their clothing seemed to pull them forward, leaving a subtle gap in their wake. The small everyday interactions reflected this relentless momentum. A brief nod of acknowledgement, a quick glance as paths crossed, but rarely a pause, rarely a lingering moment of connection. There was always a task to be done, a journey to be made, a responsibility to fulfill. The very air of the village hummed with this ceaseless activity, a constant low drone of purpose and effort. The scent of newly cut wood, of freshly baked bread, of animals in their enclosures, all spoke of a vibrant, ongoing life that moved with its own inherent speed. This relentless pace underscored a fundamental truth. The world did not wait. Its seasons turned, its demands remained, its needs persisted. And the aging body, with its stiffness, its aches, its slower reactions, had to adapt to this unyielding momentum or be left behind in its quiet wake. The cold wind, when it swept through the village, seemed to carry the urgency of time, rushing past without pause, touching every surface, but acknowledging no lingering. The rough earth underfoot, so familiar, continued its unyielding presence, demanding continuous, albeit slower, negotiation with every step. Once, there was a time when the evenings around the hearth were filled with the resonance of your voice, weaving tales of long-ago days, of struggles and triumphs, of lessons learned from hard-won experience. The flickering candlelight would dance on the rapt faces of the younger ones, their eyes wide, their bodies still, held captive by the power of the spoken word. The scent of wood smoke, mingling with the aroma of simmering stew, filled the air with a comforting warmth. These were the moments when memory became alive, when the past was tangible, when wisdom flowed freely from one generation to the next. But now, a quiet weariness had settled into the very core of your being, permeating every muscle, every thought. Now your voice is tired. It was not merely a physical fatigue, though that was always present, lending a breathy quality to the words, a subtle tremor to the timbre. It was a deeper exhaustion, a weariness of spirit that made the effort of summoning memories, of shaping them into narrative, an almost unbearable burden. The throat would feel dry, the chest would tighten with the effort, and the words, when they did emerge, were often slow, hesitant, losing their vibrant edge. The sound of your own voice, when heard, seemed distant, thinner, less compelling than it once was. And because of this weariness, because the energy to engage, to capture attention, to command the space with spoken narrative had diminished, the stories have stopped asking to be told. The eager faces no longer turn to you with the same expectation. Their eyes, once bright with anticipation, now often drifted, distracted by the flickering firelight, by the rustle of a mouse in the thatch, by the quiet conversations amongst themselves. The space around you, once alive with the silent demand for narrative, now simply held the quiet sounds of the dwelling. The soft crackle of the fire, the murmur of younger voices, the gentle rustle of a sleeping child. The scent of simmering herbs, usually associated with comfort, now felt heavy, almost suffocating in its stillness. The memories themselves remained vast and intricate, a rich tapestry woven from decades of lived experience. The sharp chill of a winter journey, the sweet taste of a summer berry, the feel of a newborn's delicate skin, the harsh scrape of a famine year's hunger. These sensations and recollections remained vivid, often more so than the immediate present. But the bridge between these inner worlds and the outer world of shared sound had become difficult to traverse. The effort of articulation, of drawing the threads of memory into a coherent narrative, felt too great. Sometimes a fragment of a story might rise unbidden, a flash of a long-ago face, a glimpse of a forgotten event. The lips might part, a breath might be drawn, but the words would remain trapped, unspoken. The opportunity would pass, swallowed by the ongoing hum of the dwelling, by the vibrant, unceasing present of the younger ones. The quiet stillness that enveloped you became not just a physical state, but a profound emotional one, a world where the past, though rich within, rarely found its way into the shared air. The feeling of cool, dry air against your lips, as words remained unformed, was a subtle, constant reminder of this unspoken existence. The rough texture of the wool cloak, clutched in tired hands, felt like a silent companion in this quiet withdrawal. The constant, rhythmic pulse of daily life, the unbroken chain of tasks and necessities, continued its relentless flow within the dwelling and beyond. The hearth fire burned, the water was drawn, the food was prepared, the garments were mended. But within this unbroken rhythm, a profound, subtle change began to manifest in the very fabric of recognition and acknowledgement. Daily life continues, but your name is used less often. At first, it was barely perceptible. A quick instruction given directly to a younger family member, bypassing your immediate presence. A request for a tool or a direction for a task, directed to hands quicker and stronger, even if your own were nearby. The absence was not a deliberate exclusion, but an unconscious bypassing, a quiet recognition of shifting capabilities. Your ear might strain to catch the direction of a whispered word, only to realize it was not intended for you. The air, thick with the sounds of communal activity, occasionally held a subtle void where your name once resonated. As the days blurred into weeks and the body moved with ever greater slowness, this subtle absence grew. Your name, once a clear and distinct call, began to fade from the casual exchanges, from the direct addresses. Instructions might be given to the one by the fire or the one in the corner, a generic reference replacing the specific identity. The sense of being addressed directly, of being singled out by the sound of your own name, became a rare occurrence. The scent of the familiar dwelling, with its constant wood smoke and earthy dampness, began to feel less tied to a singular presence within its walls. The children, once eager for your attention, for your stories, would now pass by without a direct greeting, their young voices bright and clear, their gazes fixed on their own small, immediate tasks. The sound of their playful shouts, their quick footsteps across the packed earth, seemed to emphasize the growing quietude around your own person. Their innocent oblivion to the fading of your name was perhaps the most poignant aspect of this slow erasure. And then, the quiet, almost complete disappearance of your name from the fabric of daily conversation. It was a gradual fading, until it was not spoken at all unless someone is whispering about death. The silence around your name became a heavy presence, a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable. When spoken, it was in hushed tones accompanied by somber glances, a low murmur of concern for your health, for your fading strength, for the approach of the final, unyielding silence. The words would be spoken with a different timbre, a note of solemnity, a profound awareness of the body's ultimate journey towards the earth. The coldness of the damp stone hearth, pressed against an aching back, seemed to underscore this stark reality. The pervasive scent of the dwelling, usually comforting, now held a subtle undercurrent of mortality when your name was uttered. The whisper of your name, when it did break the silence, felt less like an address and more like a premonition, a subtle preparation for a farewell. It was a profound and isolating shift, a quiet fading into the background where one's existence became less about active participation and more about the slow, inexorable march towards the inevitable. The very air around you seemed to absorb this unspoken understanding, holding it in its heavy stillness. The rustle of heavy fabric, as another passed by without direct address, seemed to articulate this slow, quiet erasure. The fading of the name, the subtle withdrawal of acknowledgement, settled deep into the quiet fabric of existence. The body, though slower, still worked, its tasks performed with a quiet, enduring patience. Yet, as the outward presence diminished, the internal landscape became more stark, more exposed to the raw realities of the world, particularly as the colder seasons drew near. As the days shortened and the sun offered less warmth, a pervasive chill began to settle not just in the air, but deep within the bones. The cold seeps deeper now. It was a cold that no longer merely touched the skin or settled upon the garments, but seemed to penetrate the very marrow, finding purchase in every aching joint, every tired muscle. The dampness that rose from the packed earth floor seemed to amplify this internal chill, a persistent clamminess that clung to the skin. The scent of damp earth, always present, now carried a sharper, more biting edge, a constant reminder of the pervasive cold. The familiar comfort of woven textiles offered less solace. Blankets do less. The heavy wool, once a formidable barrier against the biting air, now felt porous, unable to fully contain the body's diminishing warmth. You might pull the rough fabric tighter, drawing it closer around the shoulders, tucking it under the chin, but the persistent chill would find its way through, a subtle, unyielding presence. The feeling of cold threads against the skin, despite the layers, was a constant, subtle irritation. The rustle of the coarse fabric as you shifted, seeking a warmer pocket of air, was a familiar sound in the quiet hours. The weight of the blankets, once comforting, now felt merely heavy, unable to perform their primary function with the same efficacy. And the hearth fire, the very heart of the dwelling's warmth and light, seemed to retreat, its comforting embrace less potent. The fire seems farther away. Its crackle and hiss, once a roaring presence that filled the small space, now felt muted, distant, as if its warmth struggled to reach your quiet corner. The heat that radiated from the glowing embers, once a pervasive comfort, now barely seemed to touch the exposed skin, leaving an enduring chill in the hands, on the face. You might huddle closer, extending a trembling hand toward the dwindling flames, feeling only a fleeting warmth before the cold reclaimed the air around it. The scent of wood smoke, though still rich and deep, held a subtle coolness as if diluted by the pervasive cold that filled the dwelling. The dancing shadows cast by the fire, once large and comforting, now seemed smaller, more timid, retreating into the deeper gloom of the corners. The sound of a log shifting, a faint ember popping, echoed in a way that emphasized the vast, cold space around the small pocket of warmth. The cold was not merely a physical sensation, it was a profound presence that reshaped the experience of being. It seeped into the very thoughts, making them slower, heavier, infused with a constant awareness of the body's losing battle against the encroaching chill. To move was to expend precious warmth. To stay still was to invite the cold's deeper embrace. The warmth of a cupped hand, briefly held against a chilled cheek, offered a fleeting, almost poignant contrast to the relentless chill that permeated everything. As the cold deepened and the days grew shorter, the provisions, carefully hoarded, began to dwindle. The abundance of harvest faded into the lean realities of winter. A subtle, unspoken hierarchy asserted itself at the simple table, guided by the stark realities of survival. Meals become thinner. The wooden bowls, once brimming with thick gruel or hearty stews, now held smaller portions, their contents more watery, less substantial. The rich aroma of simmering meat, once a frequent presence, became a rare and cherished memory. The earthy scent of root vegetables, boiled and reboiled, filled the air, a constant reminder of the limited larder. The unspoken allocation was clear, though never articulated. The strongest, those whose labor was most vital for the ongoing survival of the family and the community, received the sustenance necessary to maintain their strength. The best cuts go to those with strength. The leanest portions of dried meat, the richest parts of a vegetable, the largest share of the precious bread, these would be subtly, unconsciously directed toward the younger backs, the swifter hands, the bodies that moved with vigor in the fields or by the hearth. Your own bowl would hold less, its contents less nourishing, a quiet testament to the body's diminishing capacity for strenuous labor. The taste of thin, watery broth, a faint echo of the richer flavors that once were, settled on the tongue, leaving a subtle, lingering hunger. The sensation of hunger, once a sharp demand, now became a dull, pervasive ache, a constant companion in the belly. It was not the gnawing hunger of famine, but a quiet, persistent emptiness, an absence of true satisfaction. The warmth of the thin gruel slipping down the throat offered only fleeting comfort, its heat quickly dissipating into the persistent cold that permeated the body. The clatter of wooden spoons against the bowls, the subtle slurping sounds of eating continued around you, a rhythm of sustenance that you participated in, but in a diminished capacity. There was no resentment, no protest, only a quiet, stoic acceptance of this reality. It was understood that survival demanded such choices, that the strength of the young ensured the continuity of the lineage, the continued working of the land. The faint sound of teeth grinding on a tougher piece of bread from another's portion, the sight of a younger hand reaching for a larger piece of root, these were the subtle indicators of this unspoken distribution. The air, thick with the scent of plain, humble food, carried the quiet understanding of necessity. The rough feel of the wooden spoon in the hand, its familiar curve, brought a subtle pang of memory, a fleeting image of a time when the bowl it dipped into was always full, when the portions were generous. Now, the weight of that same spoon felt heavier, its contents lighter, a constant reminder of the body's shifting place in the hierarchy of need. The cold that permeated the dwelling seemed to amplify this internal emptiness, a pervasive chill that food could no longer fully appease. The relentless march of time, coupled with the body's increasing frailty, began to limit even the most fundamental tasks, quietly transferring responsibilities to younger, stronger hands. The familiar tools, once extensions of one's own will, slowly became foreign, then entirely relinquished. One might reach for the long-handled ladle, its wooden surface smoothed by countless stirs, its weight familiar in the hand. But the fingers, stiff with cold and ache, would no longer quite encircle it with the same firm grip. The subtle tremor in the hand might cause the ladle to clatter against the side of the earthenware pot or to slip from the grasp entirely. The liquid in the pot, often thick and heavy, would resist the weak stir, the effort becoming too great, causing pain to shoot through the arm, to settle deep in the shoulder. Your fingers no longer gripped the ladle with the same authority, the same confident ease. The familiar warmth of the wooden handle, once a comfort, now felt distant, almost alien in the weakened grasp. The faint scent of the simmering soup, warm and inviting, now seemed to mock the inability to truly engage with its preparation. A quiet recognition would pass between those present, a subtle glance exchanged over the flickering flames of the hearth. Without a word, without a direct request, someone else would step forward. A younger hand, strong and steady, would take the ladle, its movements fluid and effortless, stirring the contents of the pot with a confident rhythm. Someone else stirs the soup. The sound of the wooden spoon scraping against the bottom of the earthenware, the gentle gurgle of the simmering liquid, would continue, but the hand guiding it would be different, the rhythm no longer your own. The warmth radiating from the pot, once intimately felt through your own efforts, now seemed to emanate from another's strength, a subtle shift in the very source of comfort. This was not a loss of dignity, not a moment of shame, but a quiet, undeniable acknowledgement of a body's diminishing capacity. The tools of daily life, once so personally wielded, now became instruments for others. You might sit nearby, perhaps on a low stool, your hands resting in your lap, watching the rhythmic stirring, the steam rising from the pot, its comforting scent filling the air. The faint crackle of the fire, the subtle shifting of the cooking food would be the sounds that accompanied this quiet observation, this silent transfer of responsibility. The feeling of idleness, though often unwelcome, became more frequent. Hands that had known ceaseless labor for decades now found themselves without immediate task, their purpose gradually receding. The rough texture of your own skin, worn smooth in places by repetitive work, became a quiet, intimate landscape of time past, of efforts made. The subtle ache in the joints, even at rest, served as a constant reminder of the body's long history of toil, its present state of diminishment. The scent of the hearth, a constant presence, mingled with the faint aroma of the prepared food, a subtle reminder of what was being created by other hands. The very air around you seemed to hold this quiet acceptance, this slow letting go. The physical changes, the constant cold, the thinner meals, all conspired to deepen the body's weariness, pushing it towards a longer, yet less restorative form of rest. You sleep longer, but not better. The nights would stretch out, hours blurring into an indistinct expanse of semi-consciousness, yet the profound exhaustion that settled deep in the bones would never truly recede. The body, seeking solace from its constant aches and pains, would crave more hours of stillness, sinking into a heavy, almost lethargic slumber. But the rest found was shallow, disturbed by discomfort, by the cold, by the constant internal dialogue of a fading body. The rough straw mattress, its brittle stalks poking through the thin linen, offered little comfort. The dampness that rose from the packed earth floor seemed to penetrate the body even in sleep, clinging to the limbs, intensifying the chill. You might shift restlessly, a soft groan escaping with the effort, trying to find a position that eased the ache in the back, the stiffness in the hips, the pervasive throbbing in the knees, the subtle rustle of the straw, the soft creak of the old timbers of the dwelling. These were the constant sounds of a restless night. The scent of old, damp straw, mingled with the stale scent of sleep, filled the small space around the sleeping form. And within this troubled slumber, the mind would drift into a landscape of the past, vivid and persistent. Your dreams are cluttered with things that once were. Not coherent narratives, but fragments, impressions, sensory echoes of a life lived long and fully. The sharp scent of freshly cut hay, carried on a summer breeze. The precise feel of a tool in a younger, stronger hand. The sound of a voice, clear and vibrant, that now only exists in the silent chambers of memory. The warmth of a long-vanished hearth, the taste of a meal long eaten. These moments, imbued with the clarity of a past that now seemed more real than the present, would flicker through the mind, relentless and vivid. The dreams would be crowded with faces long gone, with tasks long completed, with landscapes that existed only in the mind's eye. A rhythmic thud of an axe, the distant lowing of a cow, the familiar creak of a specific floorboard. Sounds from a forgotten past, replaying with startling immediacy. The body, even in sleep, would respond. A subtle twitch of a finger, a faint tightening of the jaw, a quiet sigh escaping the lips. Yet, even in these vivid dreamscapes, the underlying weariness persisted, a dull ache beneath the surface of the dreaming mind. Upon waking, the heavy exhaustion would remain, a thick blanket of fatigue that weighed down the limbs, clouded the thoughts. The dreams, though vivid, offered no true refreshment, only a constant re-engagement with a past that could no longer be touched, a life that no longer was. The cold of the morning, creeping through the unglazed openings, felt even sharper after the warm, but restless, immersion in the past. The scent of lingering dream, of memory and presence, seemed to cling to the air around the bed, a quiet testament to the mind's ceaseless journeying into what once was. As the profound cold of winter settled fully upon the land, and the days offered only a sparse, weak light, a quiet understanding permeated the village, a somber acceptance of the inevitable. The frailest among them, those whose bodies had long battled the relentless creep of time and the harshness of existence, would often succumb. Some elders drift away in winter. It was not a sudden, dramatic event, not a violent end, but a quiet, almost imperceptible fading. The slow slowing of breath, the gradual deepening of sleep, the quiet withdrawal from the familiar sounds and sights of the dwelling, a gentle slipping away, like smoke dissolving into the vast cold air, leaving behind only an empty space. The body, worn thin by decades of tireless effort, by countless seasons of hunger and cold, by the constant ache of bone and muscle, would simply cease its tireless struggle. There was no pain in the final moments, only a profound stillness, a peaceful cessation of effort. The scent of the dying fire, its last embers fading, often accompanied this final departure, a mirroring of the slowing life within. When this stillness arrived, when the subtle rise and fall of the chest ceased, no one is surprised. There was no shock, no outcry, only a quiet, solemn acceptance. It was understood as the natural order of things, an expected end to a life lived fully, if harshly. The cold of the dwelling, the lack of ample food, the cumulative toll of endless labor. These were known enemies, and winter was their most potent ally. The silence that followed such a passing was not one of shock, but of profound, respectful recognition. The air, heavy with the memory of the departed, seemed to hold its breath for a moment before the quiet hum of daily life slowly, inevitably, resumed. The preparation of the body would be simple, direct. The rough linen, clean and stiff from recent washing, would be wrapped around the still form. The touch of the cold, unyielding skin, the absence of any warmth, was a stark, tangible reality. The scent of cold, clean linen, mingled with the faint, lingering scent of human presence, filled the small space around the still body. The digging of the grave in the hardened earth would be a slow, difficult task, the pickaxe striking the frozen soil with a dull, rhythmic thud. The cold air, biting at the exposed skin of those who labored, mirrored the coldness of the earth that would soon embrace the departed. The scent of freshly turned earth, raw and cold, would rise with the disturbed soil, a profound aroma of finality. And then, a quiet procession to the burial ground, the small group moving slowly across the snow-dusted or mud-streaked paths. The only sounds would be the soft crunch of footsteps, the quiet whisper of the wind through bare branches, and perhaps the low murmur of a blessing from the elder among them. The cold silence of the vast open sky would bear witness to the earth's quiet reclamation of what was always its own. The heavy, pervasive chill of winter that had so deeply penetrated the body in its last days now became a final, complete embrace. The dwelling, though missing a presence, would soon return to its rhythms, the fire rekindled, the pots stirred, the cold held at bay by the living, a testament to the ceaseless, unwavering cycle of life and death in a world that waited for no one. The cold of winter, a constant companion, finally claimed its due, and some elders drifted away, their passing unnoticed by the wider world. The stillness, a profound quiet, settled over the dwelling, leaving those who remained to contend with thinner meals, a colder hearth, and the persistent ache in their bones. The world, unyielding in its demands, continued its relentless rhythm, and the aging body, though still present, found its place increasingly diminished, its purpose gently fading with each passing day. As the body's strength receded further, the scope of the world around you began to contract, mirroring the internal withdrawal. The familiar dwelling, once a vast landscape of tasks and movements, seemed to shrink, its boundaries pressing closer, its warmth more elusive. The room becomes smaller. The furthest corners, once easily reached, now felt distant, unattainable, their shadows deepening with an unspoken finality. The sounds of the dwelling, the murmur of voices, the clatter of pots, the soft crunch of footsteps began to recede, becoming fainter as if filtered through layers of thickening air. The air itself, thick with the scent of old wood smoke and damp earth, seemed to grow heavier, pressing in. And with this contraction of space came a subtle yet profound change in the light itself. The light grows dimmer. The small, unglazed window openings, which once offered a clear view of the changing sky, now seemed to let in less brightness, casting perpetual gloom upon the rough timber walls and the packed earth floor. Even at midday, when the sun was at its zenith, the dwelling remained in a soft twilight, the corners shrouded in deep, unchanging shadow. The flickering warmth of the hearth fire, a fragile beacon against the pervasive darkness, struggled to penetrate the pervasive gloom, its light barely reaching beyond the immediate circle of its embers. The faint, sweet scent of beeswax from a single candle, when lit, would seem to dissipate quickly, unable to truly lift the deep shadows. The once familiar journey across the floor, from the low stool by the hearth to the straw mattress in the corner, became an arduous expedition. Each movement required immense effort, a careful balancing of a body that no longer held its weight with confidence. The feet, heavy and slow, shuffled across the rough texture of the packed earth and straw, each step a deliberate, almost painful negotiation. Your steps grow fewer. The world outside the dwelling, the fields, the well, the communal spaces of the village, these became distant memories, their sights and sounds experienced only through the muted accounts of others or through the fading light of a doorway. The very act of standing, of maintaining an upright posture, became an effort sustained for only brief moments, the body craving the stillness of its resting place, the soft drag of worn fabric against the straw, the quiet groan accompanying a shift in position. These were the constant sounds of a world narrowing to its smallest confines. The chill that seeped into the floor from the earth below felt more pronounced, a constant cold beneath the weary feet. The rhythms of human connection too began to change, adapting to this profound withdrawal. The visits, once occasions for shared labor or comforting companionship, subtly shifted in their purpose, reflecting a communal awareness of the approaching end. People visit not to speak, but to check. They would enter the dwelling quietly, their footsteps muffled by the straw or the packed earth, bringing with them the chill of the outside air, the scent of the fields, or the familiar wood smoke of their own homes. Their gazes, when they turned to you, were not seeking conversation, not inviting a story, but rather assessing, observing. Their eyes would sweep over the still form, noting the shallow rise and fall of breath, the pallor of the skin in the dim light, the slight tremor of a hand resting on rough wool. The silence that fell between you and them was heavy, filled with unspoken questions and quiet observations. A hand might reach out, not to grasp yours in warmth, but to touch a forehead, to test for fever, its coolness of fleeting sensation against your skin. A quiet murmur might pass between the visitor and a younger family member present. A low, hushed exchange of words concerning your appetite, your sleep, the depth of your cough. These were not conversations you were meant to participate in, but rather discussions about your fading presence, as if you were already a distant, almost abstract entity. The sounds of these hushed voices, their meaning conveyed more by tone than by discernible words, would blend into the ambient hum of the dwelling, a subtle reminder of being observed, assessed. The offerings they brought, if any, were no longer practical contributions to daily work, but quiet acts of care for the fading body. A small cup of thin broth, its faint aroma rising with steam. A fresh piece of clean linen, its roughness softened by many washes. A small, carefully gathered bundle of calming herbs, their dry, earthy scent filling the air. These were gestures of quiet solicitude, not of shared life. The warmth of the broth, sliding down the throat, offered a fleeting comfort against the pervasive cold within the body. The touch of the rough linen against the increasingly fragile skin was a testament to simple, practical care. The visits were often brief, their purpose fulfilled with the quiet observation. A nod, a soft sigh, a gentle movement towards the door. They left behind a quiet space that felt heavier, imbued with the unspoken knowledge of their assessment. The outside world, with its demanding rhythms, would reclaim them quickly. You would be left in the deepening quiet, the lingering scent of their presence slowly fading, the feeling of their brief, evaluating gaze still resting upon your still form. The rough texture of the worn blanket, pulled tighter around the shoulders, became a subtle barrier between the observed self and the observing world. The single candle flame, flickering in the dimness, seemed to cast a longer, more solitary shadow, emphasizing the isolated nature of this quiet decline. As the world outside contracted and the interactions with others diminished, the landscape of your existence narrowed to the most intimate confines of the dwelling, to the unwavering presence of the walls themselves. You watch the same wall each day. Its rough surface, composed of interwoven branches and packed earth, became a canvas for the slow dance of light and shadow, a silent companion in the lengthening hours of stillness. Every imperfection, every subtle shift in its texture became intimately known. The faint scent of the raw earth within the daub, a subtle presence, became as familiar as your own skin. On this wall, a particular feature would hold the gaze, an anchor in the vast, undifferentiated expanse of time. The same small crack, a hairline fracture in the dried clay, perhaps caused by the settling of the timbers or the subtle tremor of the earth beneath. Its delicate, winding path became a source of quiet contemplation, its slight irregularities a miniature landscape to be explored by the eye alone. The dust that gathered in its hollows, the way the light caught its edges, the subtle widening or narrowing with the changing humidity in the air, these minute details became significant, absorbing hours of silent observation. The rough texture of the daub, seen so closely, revealed its constituent elements, fragments of straw, grains of earth, tiny pebbles. And across this unchanging surface, the light from the small unglazed window or the flickering hearth fire would cast a daily, rhythmic transformation. The same shadow across the beams would begin its slow crawl. In the morning, perhaps a sharp, defined line, moving steadily as the sun ascended. By midday, it might soften, diffusing into a wider, less distinct shape. In the evening, it would lengthen, stretching across the rough-hewn timbers of the roof, merging with the deeper gloom, until the wall itself was swallowed by darkness, leaving only the faintest glow from the banked embers. The scent of the aged wood, warm in the sun or cool in the shadow, subtly changed with the light's progression. This repetitive observation was not born of choice, but of necessity. With limited movement, with senses dimming, with conversations receding, the unyielding presence of the wall became the primary window to a changing world, however subtle those changes might be. The feeling of the cold, damp air against the cheek, unchanging, underscored the static nature of the view. The only sounds would be the soft, internal rhythms of the dwelling, the quiet sigh of settling timbers, the distant murmur of other inhabitants, the almost imperceptible rustle of unseen creatures within the thatch. These were the constants, the enduring realities in a world that had shrunk to the size of a single, unchanging visual field. Time, once marked by tasks and journeys, was now measured by the imperceptible creep of a shadow, by the subtle dance of dust in a crack, by the steady, unhurried progression of light across a single familiar surface. Even as the body persisted, a profound internal separation began to occur, a quiet drifting away from the vibrant currents of shared existence. You are still breathing and still here within the confines of the familiar dwelling, within the reach of the hearth's dwindling warmth, the shallow rise and fall of the chest, the faint, warm mist of breath on cold air. These were the undeniable signs of continued life. The physical presence remained, a still point in the shifting landscape of the communal home. The scent of your own skin, mingled with the rough wool of your garments, was a constant, intimate presence. Yet, despite this undeniable physical presence, a deeper, more pervasive truth settled. But you are no longer part of the living rhythm, the vibrant pulse of the dwelling, the constant ebb and flow of activity, of conversation, of shared laughter and quiet frustrations. This rhythm flowed around you, unhindered, almost oblivious to your continued existence. The rhythmic thud of kneading dough, the soft clatter of wooden bowls, the brisk footsteps of younger bodies moving with purpose. These sounds were no longer intimately integrated with your own movements, your own contributions. You were an observer, a quiet presence on the periphery, watching the stream of life flow past without you. The sun continued its daily cycle, warming the walls, drawing out the scents of earth and wood. The cold of the evening settled, drawing bodies closer around the hearth. But these fundamental rhythms, while still perceived, no longer demanded your active participation. The tasks that once defined the hours, the seasons, the mending of nets, the spinning of wool, the tending of the garden, were now performed by other hands, their movements quicker, more efficient, their energy unburdened by the weight of years. The sight of these familiar actions, performed by others, created a subtle ache of memory, a quiet pang for the strength that once was. The silence around you deepened, not merely from the absence of questions, but from the quiet acknowledgement that your voice was no longer a necessary part of the ongoing narrative. The sounds of others' lives, their whispered plans, their shared anxieties, their small triumphs, these conversations unfolded around you, sometimes audible, sometimes merely a murmur, but always external, rarely involving your direct engagement. The air, thick with the shared breath of the living, seemed to move with a different current, bypassing your still, quiet space. The cold that seeped into the dwelling, the warmth that radiated from the fire, the taste of food, the texture of rough fabric. These sensations remained, but they were experienced in a state of profound detachment. The connection to the tangible world was less immediate, less demanding. You were simply there, breathing, observing, existing within the narrowing confines of a body that had completed its active purpose, waiting for the final, quiet dissolution. The rough texture of the straw beneath the hands, the persistent cold from the earth, were the last tangible anchors in this slow drift. And then, the moment came, not with drama or fanfare, but with the quiet dignity of a candle flame extinguishing in a breath of wind. When the end comes, it is soft and unnoticed. There is no struggle, no last gasp, no sudden shift that tears at the fabric of the dwelling. It is a gentle slipping away, a profound stillness that descends upon the body, a quiet surrender to the overwhelming weariness, to the persistent cold that had settled so deeply within the bones. The shallow breath, once a constant, fragile presence, simply ceases, its rhythm dissolving into the vast, silent air. The scent of warm, fading human presence, mingling with the perennial wood smoke, gradually dissipates, leaving only the cold, earthy aroma of the dwelling itself. The moments after are marked by an initial quietude, a subtle absorption of the stillness into the very fabric of the dwelling. Perhaps the first sign is simply an extended quietness, a profound lack of movement from the accustomed resting place. No rustle of straw, no subtle shift of weight, no faint sigh. The dim light from the window or the flickering glow of the hearth fire continues its slow dance across the familiar walls, illuminating nothing but stillness. The heavy wool blanket, once pulled tight for warmth, remains undisturbed. For a time, the change might go unremarked, absorbed into the ongoing flow of daily life. The quiet murmur of the family, the rhythmic sounds of their tasks might continue, their attention directed outward, towards the demands of the day. The world outside, unconcerned by the cessation of a single breath, continues its relentless turning. The sun keeps its slow journey across the sky, indifferent to the profound stillness that has descended within the dwelling. The wind continues its whisper through the thatch. The distant lowing of cattle carries on the air. The world keeps turning. Eventually, a quiet discovery, a hand reaching to offer a thin bowl of gruel, a gentle touch to a still arm. The absence of a response, the lack of warmth, the chilling stillness. A soft gasp, a quiet, indrawn breath from the discoverer, but no outcry, no dramatic sorrow, only a profound, unspoken understanding. The scent of cold linen drawn to cover the still form mingles with the faint metallic scent of absence. The body, once a repository of a lifetime of experience, now becomes an empty vessel, its warmth surrendered, its purpose complete. The space it occupied, once filled with the subtle sounds of breath and movement, now holds a profound, echoing silence. And into this void, almost immediately, life flows forward, an inexorable continuation. A younger voice, perhaps a child's clear call from across the dwelling, or a quiet instruction from a vibrant, living presence, will fill the silence. A younger voice fills the silence you left. The sounds of daily life, of tasks resumed, of needs expressed, will gently, quietly fill the space, absorbing the brief moment of profound stillness, weaving it into the unending tapestry of existence. The world, ancient and unyielding, continues its ceaseless rhythm, marked by the ongoing cycle of birth and death, a quiet, unending flow. The rough texture of the packed earth, unchanging and patient, receives what returns to it, absorbing all life, all cessation, into its vast, silent memory. To live a life so profoundly connected to the body, to its slow dissolution, to its inevitable retreat, was to experience existence in a way profoundly different from our own. It meant a constant, inescapable dialogue with physical sensation, the unrelenting cold seeping into the bones, the persistent ache in the joints, the dimming of the eyes, the dulling of the ears. The self was not an abstract entity, but a palpable, material presence, intimately intertwined with the flesh and its limitations. The decline of the body was not a distant concept, but a daily, hourly reality, shaping every movement, every moment of stillness. What did it mean to live like this? It meant to understand patience not as a virtue to be cultivated, but as an inherent condition of existence. The pace of life was dictated by the seasons, by the growing strength of the young, by the diminishing capacity of the old. There was no rushing, no frantic effort to outpace the inevitable. It meant a profound acceptance of dependence, a quiet reliance on the hands and voices of those still vigorous, those still in the full current of life's rhythm. The ladle taken from a trembling hand was not a loss of dignity, but a practical act of necessity, understood by all. It meant that identity was not simply a matter of thought or spirit, but of observable capacity. To be the old one, the slow one, was not a judgment, but a description of a body no longer able to keep pace, its utility shifting from active production to quiet presence. The fading of one's name from daily conversation was a subtle yet profound erasure, a reflection of the body's increasing immobility, its withdrawal from the vibrant center of communal life. Yet, in this effacement, there was also a peculiar kind of liberation, a shedding of the constant demands that had defined a lifetime. To live like this was to confront mortality, not as a distant fear, but as an ever-present companion. The cold of winter, the thinning meals, the quiet stillness of those who drifted away. These were constant reminders of life's precariousness, of the body's ultimate return to the earth. There was no illusion of control, no complex medical interventions to prolong the inevitable. Only the raw, unvarnished truth of a life cycle, completed. The very air, thick with the scent of wood smoke and earth, carried the unspoken knowledge of birth and death, woven into every breath. It meant that wisdom was not acquired through books, but etched into the lines of a face, into the tremor of a hand, into the quiet understanding in the eyes. It was a wisdom born of enduring, of observing, of simply being present through countless cycles of hardship and small triumphs. And though this wisdom might go unspoken, unasked for, it permeated the space around the elder, a silent presence, a deep echo of lived experience that shaped the communal unconscious, even as the conscious conversation moved on. It was a life lived with humility, a profound recognition of one's place within the vast, indifferent tapestry of the natural world, a quiet acceptance of the body's slow journey back to dust. The light in the dwelling softens further, dissolving into the deepest hues of twilight, then into the profound, unyielding darkness of night. The faint, sweet scent of beeswax from a candle long extinguished lingers for a moment, then dissipates entirely, leaving only the deep, pervasive aroma of wood smoke clinging to the air, settling into the very fabric of the old timbers. The earth floor, cool and silent, absorbs all sound, all warmth, all movement. The rhythm of breath, which once held the quiet story of a body's long journey, now slows, becoming almost imperceptible. A profound stillness descends, deeper than any sleep, quieter than any winter's night. The rough wool of the blanket, a familiar weight against the skin, feels cool now, releasing its last vestiges of warmth into the vast, indifferent cold that fills the dwelling. The subtle rustle of straw beneath a silent form is heard no more, absorbed into the deep quiet. The very dust motes, suspended in the last faint shafts of moonlight that might penetrate the small window, cease their slow dance, settling gently upon every surface, covering all equally. Outside, the wind, a ceaseless companion, sighs through the bare branches of ancient trees, carrying no urgency, only the profound, patient murmur of the turning world. The distant cry of an owl, a mournful, echoing sound, fades into the vast, silent expanse of the night sky. The world keeps its turning, its rhythms unbroken, indifferent to the quiet passing within the humble dwelling. The story does not end with a final image, but dissolves. It is not a conclusion, but a quiet, gentle vanishing. Like smoke from a forgotten chimney dissipating into the endless sky, the particular contours of this life, this body, these sensations soften, blur, and recede. The echoes of the past, the textures, the smells, the subtle sounds, all become one with the deep, ancient silence of time itself. There is no final word, no lasting image, only a soft, pervasive sense of timelessness, of slowness, and a gentle, inevitable fading into the vast, unspoken quiet that holds all things that once were. The body, returned to the earth, becomes indistinguishable from the soil, its journey complete, its existence absorbed back into the silent, enduring rhythm of the world.